Hello and welcome to Interprepedia. My name is Rosa, I'm an interpreter, and in this video I'll be sharing with you a free court interpreting practice exam for the oral component of the State Court Interpreter Certification. These practice exercises were prepared by the National Center for State Courts for the Judicial Council of California. They can be used to prepare for the bilingual interpreting exam or to study on your own or with a study group to improve your interpreting skills. You can find the link to the practice materials in the description box of this video, but before you review them, please watch for a few more moments. This mock exam covers the three modes of interpretation that you will find in the real exam, which are sight translation, consecutive interpretation, and simultaneous interpretation. However, there are two caveats. One, the court interpreting practice exam is only available in writing. It's a PDF document and it doesn't include any recordings. But if you want to go through the experience as if you were taking the real oral test, you can follow along with this video because I will be reading for you the oral portions of this mock exam. The second caveat is the practice exam is only available in English. So if you want to make it language specific, you'll need to translate some parts into your foreign language. In this video, I will be reading the oral portions of the exam in English only, and there are three reasons for that. Obviously, this will allow more colleagues to benefit from it regardless of their language of expertise. Also, 60% of the actual oral exam requires you to interpret from English into your foreign language. And the third reason is, even if it's an English-only mock exam, you'll still be able to practice and test your skills in the different modalities. I highly recommend you read the instructions on the practice material, which go from page 1 to page 27. But if you want to use this video as a guide to mimic the real test experience, then stop reading on page 27 and review the rest after you've completed the test following this video. The setup that I recommend for the practice test would be to have a computer where you'll have one tab with this video playing and a separate tab to open the link to the practice material. These are the tools you'll need. A device so you can watch this video and open the link to the practice material, which comes in a PDF format. And like I said, I recommend opening that link from a computer or tablet because a bigger screen would be best to read the texts you'll have to sight translate. You'll need something to record yourself. It can be a phone, tablet, computer, someone else's phone, or of course, a voice recorder if you have one. This is crucial because otherwise you won't be able to review your performance. You'll need headphones. That way, when we get to the simultaneous interpretation part, your voice will be the only voice you hear in the recording. You'll also need tools to take notes for the consecutive part, and you'll need bilingual dictionaries to research terminology. Okay, now let me explain how we will do this. We will start with the two sight translations. For that, you will need to open the PDF on a separate tab. I will tell you the page number where you need to be, and I will be keeping track of time. To mimic the real exam, you'll have 6 minutes total to read for comprehension, process, and render your sight translation. After the two sight translations, we will start the consecutive interpretation portion. I will be reading the questions and answers, but you won't have to worry about pausing the video because I will make sure to include enough time for you to render your interpretation. If you need repetition, I will create timestamps so you can easily jump to the last question or answer. To mimic the real court interpreter certification oral examination, allow yourself only 2 repetitions. The last part will be the simultaneous interpretation. In the real exam, this is always an opening or closing argument by an attorney at conversational speed, which is an average of 120 words per minute. In the practice material, each exercise has a script with scoring units in bold letters that you can use as reference to give yourself an objective score, but they offer really valuable instructions on how to evaluate your performance from other perspectives, how to create your glossaries, and much more. So please read the instructions from page 1 to page 27 if you haven't yet. So, if you are ready to follow along and do the mock exam right now as if it were the real deal, keep watching. If you are not ready to take the mock exam just yet, or you need a moment to gather the tools that you'll need, you can stop watching before we get started. Remember, you are welcome back anytime, and you can use the timestamps to jump to the different segments of the video. Let's get started. Good luck! Site translation number 1. If you haven't already, go to the description box of this video and click on the link to the practice test. Then go to page 28 for the first site translation. In a moment, you will hear me count down from 5. That marks the start of your 6 minutes to site translate the text. I will let you know when the 6 minutes are up. Don't forget to record your rendition. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Time is up. Please stop your site translation and make sure to save the recording of your rendition. Site translation number 2. Now go to page 30 for the second site translation. In a moment, you will hear me count down from 5. That marks the start of your 6 minutes to site translate the text. I will let you know when the 6 minutes are up. Don't forget to record your rendition. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Time is up. Please stop your sight translation and make sure to save the recording of your rendition. Now we will begin the consecutive interpretation portion of this mock exam, where you will interpret questions and answers between an attorney and a witness. Remember, there is no need to pause, as there should be enough silence time between each utterance for you to interpret it. Refer to the timestamps if you need repetition. Try to limit yourself to 2 repetitions total, as you are only allowed 2 repetitions in the real exam. In a moment, you will hear me count down from 5. That marks the start of the consecutive interpretation section. Don't forget to record your rendition. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. If you would, please state your name for the record. Leila Corelli. And Miss Corelli, how do you know the accused in this case? He's my ex-husband. Good riddance. Please tell us if you were living with him back on May 19, 2014, if you recall. Yes, we had a lease on a house in Glenwood Park on 4372 Linwood Avenue. And how long had you been cohabitating with Clint Rogers, the defendant, in the home on Linwood Avenue? It was a short-term lease, a couple of months, maybe? Did there come a point in the late hours of May 19, 2014, that the police were knocking on your front door? More like banging on the door, but yes, I distinctly remember it because I was sound asleep and suddenly there was what sounded like a SWAT team pounding on my door. Okay, so after the banging woke you up, that's when you came out of the bedroom to answer the door? Yes. Someone asked me if I was alone, and I said yes. He could probably tell by the look on my face I wasn't telling the truth. So he asked me again, and I said no. Okay, so you decided to come clean and tell them someone else is there, and then what transpired next? One of the officers stated that he had a search warrant for my home and asked me to step outside onto my front porch as the rest of them went barreling past me into my home. You must have wondered why the police showed up with a search warrant in the middle of the night. Did you get any further explanation outside as to what was going on? I was told there was a guy that was brutally assaulted, and they had a device that tracked the GPS signal of a cell phone involved in the incident to my house. Did they mention who that person was or how that person might be connected to you or Mr. Rogers? I didn't know what the hell was going on. I was trying to be cooperative. I wasn't about to give anybody any grief for asking a bunch of questions. Were you present when Mr. Rogers told investigators where the cell phone was located? I was walking back inside at the time. So, as I was walking in, I think he and another officer were coming out of the room with the evidence. And were you aware that Mr. Rogers attempted to flush the cell phone down the toilet before the officers present tackled him to the ground? I did hear a commotion coming from the back of the house at some point, but no, I did not witness anything of that nature happen. Do you recall testifying before about Mr. Rogers' whereabouts the evening of May 18, 2014? Yes. I said that as far as I knew, he was bartending at Flipper's Casino on 3rd Street. Even when he's not working, that's where you'll find him most days, anyways, blowing through his paychecks instead of providing for his family. Were you actually home that afternoon and did you see when Mr. Rogers left for work? Yes, he left around 2. He shouted at me from the door that he was leaving for work, and I saw when he pulled out our front driveway with the car. And when your spouse came home that night, did he mention any altercations he may have had that day, or did his appearance look out of the ordinary in any way? No, he didn't mention anything of the sort. But the next morning, when I was getting the laundry together, I noticed some specks of blood on the collar of his favorite shirt. Can you describe the shirt for the court? It's a faded plaid colored shirt with frayed cuffs that has seen better days. And aside from this shirt and the cell phone, do you remember if police found anything else of relevance during their search of your home? Yes, they found several firearms, including a 9 millimeter pistol with the serial numbers filed off. Not to mention a pound of heroin in a pillowcase out in our back shed underneath some loose floorboards. I had no idea who I'd married. At some point, Did the police ask you to accompany them to the Glenwood Police Department in order to provide a statement regarding the evidence found and what you knew about it, as well as your ex-husband's goings on the previous day? Yes, and I willingly accompanied the officers. I didn't want them thinking that my husband, at the time, and I were partners in crime, so to speak. Did you suspect at any point during your marriage to Mr. Rogers that he might have been engaged in illicit activities? No, ma'am. I consider myself to be a person of moral integrity. The wool was completely pulled over my eyes as far as he was concerned. Did the police eventually return to your house with a narcotics dog to perform a sweep of the property? Yes, they searched our entire house. They made a real mess in the process, too, throwing around clothes and pulling drawers out. Thank you, Miss Corelli. Nothing further at this time, Your Honor. This is the end of the consecutive interpretation section. Please make sure to save the recording of your rendition. This is the last part of the practice exam. You'll have to interpret an attorney's closing argument at 120 words per minute. In a moment, you'll hear me count down from 5. Please start to interpret simultaneously when you hear the words, "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the jury." Don't forget to record your rendition. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. This is the case of the state versus the defendant, Clifford Jacob Tarrant. We're here because of what happened to a man, Ryan Walker, who was shot to death. We're also here because of what happened to another man, Eugene Harriet, who barely managed to escape with his life. Mr. Walker lost his life. Mr. Harriet almost lost his life because of the defendant's actions. But we're also here because the defendant operated in a particular fashion, in association with a criminal enterprise. You heard about the acts What I am now going to do is walk you through the crimes that the defendant is accused of. The first crime is a murder conspiracy, a conspiracy to murder someone in aid of racketeering. We allege that the defendant murdered Mr. Walker in aid of racketeering. In doing so, we charge that the defendant used a firearm and caused the death of another. Anytime you walk into a place, you inherently know they have rules. Well, a criminal organization has rules as well. What happens when you break those rules? You have to pay the price. Sometimes it's a death sentence, meaning the green light to kill someone has been granted. And you've heard about death sentences being applied against people who snitch. And you've also heard about acts of witness tampering. Catherine Ellis testified that the defendant threatened her twice and that he included her son in those threats. The first time, she stood up for herself. That was before the murder of Walker. The second time, in her words, she was petrified. You should know that you can be convicted of a crime even if you are not at the scene. You can be guilty of a crime if you aid and abet the crime. That's crucial to our case. This defendant wasn't at the scene. He was the ringleader. If you know a crime is going to occur, and knowing that you do something to facilitate that crime, and you intend for the crime to happen, then that's enough for aiding and abetting. So let's turn now to the murder of Ryan Walker. On January 14, 2016, the key players of said criminal organization were gathered at Tarrant's house, along with a crowd of other folks. Catherine was tasked with picking up some food at the local drive-thru and bringing it back. When she returned, she saw Walker up against the wall, surrounded by the group members, and they were confronting him and accusing him of being a rat. Catherine Ellis witnessed the defendant denounce him. Walker fainted, then he recovered and ran away. After that, a meeting took place inside the house. The defendant started barking orders and assigning roles. Tarrant told Catherine to call Walker and tell a lie to lure Walker back. We know that Catherine made that call. The records on her phone show that on January 14, 2016, at 11:38 a.m., she placed a call to Walker's number that lasted 178 seconds. She told Walker, "The coast is clear. They're gone. Let's go to the river and smoke a blunt." Shortly after, Walker arrived at the river. Two guys named Scott Graham and John Patrick, along with Catherine, pulled up on the left-hand side in a green SUV. The two men got out. Catherine started to get out of the car, but Graham, her baby's father, told her to get back in and sit her tail in the car. Then the guys all disappeared down the path toward a little wooden bridge. What happened next? John Patrick took out the gun that the defendant gave him. He thought it was a 9mm. It jammed. So Graham, also known as the GOAT, whose job it is to make sure it happened, pulled out his gun and shot Walker in the abdomen. That was the murder. That's count 1. So now let's turn to the second crime, maiming in aid of racketeering. Catherine Ellis said that one of the unusual things she saw the defendant doing that day was sharpening a butterfly knife. Eugene Harriet was repeatedly stabbed 12 times later that same day. There's a deep wound in his neck. Somehow he managed to flee to a house where a light was on and the resident called 911. What was the maiming part? When he went to the hospital, the surgeons couldn't save all of his lung. So he's missing a piece of his lung, and that's permanent. The defendant admitted to being at the trailer on the day of the stabbing, and he willingly admitted that he runs the show. No one is the boss of him. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I'll close by asking, on behalf of the state, for you to return only verdicts that are consistent with the law and the evidence that you have heard and seen in this case. Guilty on all counts. This is the end of the simultaneous interpretation section. Please make sure to save the recording of your rendition. You did it! Congratulations on putting the time and effort to improve and test your skills. If you are preparing for a court interpreter certification test, I wish you the very best. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Adios.